In this video, I will show you how to paint these fly agaric mushrooms with watercolor. So let's get started. I'm using this reference photo by Andreas from pixabay.com. I had sketched the mushrooms on my cold press watercolor paper block, and the first thing I'm going to do is mask the little dots on the mushrooms and also the little leaves and berries in the foreground. When using masking fluid, I always use an old junky brush or rubber-tipped tool to apply it. I've heard a lot of artists will dip their brush into soap to protect the bristles, but I haven't tried that. It makes me nervous. Plus, I wonder if the soap ends up at all on the paper. If you've tried this, let me know in the comments how it has worked for you. Now the masking fluid is applied and completely dry, and I'm squeezing out my first colors. The green at the top is Cascade Green by Daniel Smith, and it's a granulating color that makes great textures. I'm wetting the paper around the background of the mushrooms and in the foreground, and just a little up the base of the mushroom stems. With the bright lights, I sometimes need to lean in to see where water is still needed, which is why you see my head pop in there. On the wet paper, I mix some of the Cascade Green with burnt sienna to make a warm, earthy green. I'm careful around the mushroom caps and stems. I vary the amount of green and brown to make it look like a mottled background effect. It can take some practice to work quickly and carefully at the same time. Adding a little thicker paint here and there to make sure I have a nice, deep, rich background. And I can paint right over those tiny masked leaves and berries. A little more burnt sienna. I'm adding some water drops to the wet background. This is one of my favorite ways to add abstract texture since it displaces and pushes the paint around. In the foreground, I can also paint right over those masked off areas. I'm adding some French ultramarine to the other colors to paint the dark forest floor. At the base of the mushroom stems, or stalks, I add a light wash of green and blend it softly up the stalks. And I just keep adding here and there while the paper is still wet. Doing a little blotting to lift up and soften that edge along those stalks. I waited for the background to dry and I'm now wetting the mushroom cap. I still have the masking fluid on those little dots, protecting them. I added some new Gamboge yellow to my palette, and I'm going to start adding it along the bottom of the edges of the caps. There's my yellow. Just taking it right to that edge and letting it drift upward into the wet paper. Then with a loaded brush, I add a vivid Scarlet Lake red over the entire cap of both mushrooms. I take it into that yellow and let it spread on its own. If it's not spreading exactly the way you like, you can do a little bit of a nudge with your brush, or add a little bit more yellow until you get it the way you like it. I'm adding some water, but it's probably a little bit too much water there. Now for the shadow side, I'm adding quinacridone purple right over the red. Avoid it having too much contact with the yellow, or it will get muddy. The mushroom caps are still nice and wet, so I'm getting a soft edge where I'm blending the light and dark colors. Now I'm adding some more red in a slightly thicker concentration where it looks like it's going to start drying too light. I lost a little yellow, so I'm going to add some back in. And I'm making the shadow a little darker. Once the mushroom caps are dry, I work on the stalks. I create a grayish color from burnt sienna and ultramarine and a touch of my other colors and subtly shade the stalk with this neutral color variation, giving it shape and dimension. This is one of the most time-consuming parts of this painting, but taking the time to add the detail around the frill and get the right shading makes a big difference in getting a semi-realistic effect. Now I'm removing the masking fluid from the leaves and berries. I'm using my size 4 round brush to paint in the tiny ferns, using a light green for my yellow and the cascade green. I give the berries some dimension by painting water around a little highlight and adding the shadow colors on the bottom of the round shapes. I vary the colors from yellow to dark orange. I'm removing the masking fluid from the mushroom caps, but it's still not finished. The little spots are actually raised bumps, and they each cast a small shadow. So earlier I lied, this part is actually the most time-consuming and tedious, but again, the effect is worth it. To shade the bumps so they're not pure white, I add little dabs of yellow for some more dimension. I thought it could be helpful for my tutorial videos if I could provide you with the line drawing. I didn't make one for these mushrooms since I just drew it directly on the paper, but I could create one if I get enough responses. Let me know in the comments if having an outline is something you would be interested in. I hope you enjoyed this video and you give this project a try. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more watercolor tips and tutorials. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time.